Let me say this carefully, because years ago, I would have answered this question very differently when I was deep in the occult. When I was practicing things I now deeply regret, we were trained to make people afraid of normal experiences. We were taught to take something simple, like a sudden ringing in the ear, and attach a terrifying spiritual explanation to it. And it worked. People would panic. They would assume something supernatural was happening. They would start searching for hidden meanings, secret messages, invisible enemies, and fear opened doors. So when someone asks me today, what does it mean when my ears ring suddenly? I do not answer the way I used to. I remember one night very clearly. I was alone. The room was silent. And suddenly there was a high pitched tone in my left ear. Back then, I would have interpreted it as spiritual communication. That's what we were taught to believe. But here's what I later discovered after leaving that world. The human body is incredibly complex. Stress can trigger ringing. Fatigue can trigger ringing. Even dehydration can trigger ringing. The occult thrives on misinterpreting normal biological responses. Let me say that again, fear grows when normal things are given dark meanings. This is why I'm sharing this testimony. Because if you've experienced sudden ear ringing and immediately felt anxiety, I need you to breathe. Not everything is a sign. Not everything is an attack. Sometimes wisdom is more powerful than fear. In the next chapter, I'm going to tell you exactly how occult groups used ordinary human sensations to manipulate people, and how you can break that cycle today. If you'd like me to continue with CHAPTRTWO, tell me to proceed. When I was inside the occult, one of the first things they trained us to understand was this: control the interpretation, and you control the person. Not the event, not the symptom, the interpretation. If someone felt sudden ear ringing, we were taught to immediately assign meaning to it. Someone is speaking about you in the spirit. An entity is near. A message is being transmitted. The explanation didn't even have to be consistent. It just had to create emotional intensity. Because once fear is activated, discernment shuts down. I remember sitting in a small circle during one of our late night sessions. A woman mentioned that her ear had started ringing earlier that day. The leader didn't ask about stress levels, didn't ask about sleep, didn't ask about health. Instead, he leaned forward and lowered his voice. That means they are monitoring you. You could feel the atmosphere shift. Her breathing changed. Her posture tightened. She became suggestible. That was the goal. The occult rarely creates power. It manufactures perception. And perception, when mixed with fear, becomes self-fulfilling. The more someone believes something spiritual is happening, the more hyper aware they become of every sensation in their body. Every twitch, every sound, every shift, and suddenly normal biological processes feel supernatural. But here's what I learned after leaving that world and stepping into healing. The human nervous system responds to stress in very real ways. When you are anxious, overstimulated, exhausted, or overwhelmed, your body speaks. Sometimes it speaks through tension, sometimes through ringing in the ears, sometimes through headaches. The tragedy is not the symptom. The tragedy is when someone uses the symptom to trap you in fear. I am telling you this because some of you have been conditioned, maybe by religion, maybe by past experiences, to immediately assume the worst. But wisdom begins where panic ends. And in the next chapter, I'm going to share what I discovered about discernment, the difference between fear, driven interpretation, and true spiritual maturity. When I first left the occult, I struggled with something most people never see: silence. No more rituals. No more whispered interpretations. No more assigning mystical meaning to every physical sensation. And in that silence, I began to realize how much of what I once called discernment was actually anxiety dressed up as spirituality. Real discernment does not rush. Real discernment does not scream. Real discernment does not demand that you react immediately. In the occult, urgency was everything. If your ear rang, it meant something now. If you felt a chill, it meant something now. If you had a dream, it meant something now. There was no room for calm evaluation, no space for medical reasoning, no invitation to seek wise counsel. But true spiritual maturity looks very different. It pauses. It asks questions. It considers natural explanations before jumping to supernatural conclusions. When your ears ring suddenly, the first response should not be fear. It should be wisdom. Have you been stressed? Have you been sleeping well? Have you been exposed to loud noise? Are you dehydrated? These questions do not weaken your faith. They strengthen your balance. One of the biggest lies I believed for years was that acknowledging natural causes meant denying spiritual reality. That is simply not true. The body and the spirit are not enemies. They are intricately connected. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is drink water, rest, and calm your nervous system. Let me speak directly to you. If your ear has rung recently and your mind immediately spiraled into anxiety, that reaction is not proof of something supernatural. It may be proof that you've been conditioned to expect danger. Discernment is peaceful. Discernment is steady. Discernment is not a rush of adrenaline. In the next chapter, I want to talk about something even deeper: how to respond when unusual things happen without surrendering to fear, and how to cultivate a faith that is grounded, wise, and unshaken. There was a moment after I left the occult when something happened that tested everything I had learned. I was sitting alone, reading quietly, when suddenly my right ear began to ring. Sharp, high, persistent. For a split second, my old training tried to resurface. This means something. Pay attention. racked. But this time I did something different. I did nothing. I breathed. I stayed calm. And instead of assigning meaning to the sensation, I asked a simple question. What is happening in my body right now? I had been under stress. I had not slept well for several nights. I had consumed too much caffeine. My nervous system was overstimulated. Within a minute, the ringing faded, and in that quiet moment, I realized something powerful. Fear only grows when we cooperate with it. When something unusual happens, whether it's ear ringing, a sudden chill, or an unexplained thought, you have a choice. You can let your imagination run ahead of wisdom, or you can anchor yourself in truth. Anchoring looks like this. You pause. You regulate your breathing. You refuse to catastrophize. You consider practical explanations. You pray not from panic, but from peace. Notice the difference. Prayer from panic sounds like desperation. Prayer from peace sounds like trust. The occult trained me to interpret everything through suspicion, but healing trained me to interpret through stability. And this is important. Not every unusual experience is meaningless, but neither is every sensation a message. Maturity is knowing the difference, and maturity develops slowly through calm repetition, not dramatic reactions. If you ever experience sudden ear ringing again, do not rush to spiritual conclusions. Do not let fear narrate the moment. Center yourself. Evaluate calmly. If it persists or concerns you, seek medical advice without shame. That is wisdom, not weakness. In the final chapter, I want to leave you with something deeper: how to build a life where fear loses its grip entirely, and where your peace cannot be manipulated by ordinary human sensations. When I look back at my years in the occult, what disturbs me most is not the rituals. It's not the secrecy. It's not even the deception. It's the fear. Fear was the atmosphere we breathed. Fear was the currency we traded. Fear was the doorway we constantly tried to open in other people's lives. Because a fearful person is easy to guide. A fearful person is easy to influence. A fearful person will search for meaning in everything. But a peaceful person cannot be manipulated. And that is why I'm speaking to you now. If your ears ring suddenly and your first instinct is dread, pause and ask yourself, who taught me to interpret normal things this way? Sometimes the strongest spiritual breakthrough is unlearning the habit of panic. Peace is not passive. It is powerful. When you cultivate peace through prayer, through wisdom, through balanced thinking, you remove the very fuel that fear feeds on. You begin to live from stability instead of suspicion. You stop scanning every moment for hidden danger. You stop spiritualizing every sensation. And something shifts. Your mind becomes clearer. Your body relaxes. Your faith becomes rooted instead of reactive. Let me speak directly to those who have been anxious lately. You are not under constant hidden attack because your ear rang once. You are not being monitored because your body reacted to stress. You are human, and being human is not a spiritual failure. If anything, learning to respond calmly is a sign of growth. The greatest deliverance I experienced after leaving the occult was not dramatic. It was quiet. It was learning that I did not have to interpret everything. I did not have to decode every sensation. I did not have to live on alert. I could rest. And that is what I want for you. When unusual things happen, respond with wisdom. When anxiety rises, choose breath over panic. When your mind searches for dark explanations, anchor yourself in truth. Because true spiritual maturity is not about seeing demons in every shadow. It is about standing so firmly in peace that shadows no longer control you. And that is freedom.